evening. This is the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board. I'd like to call this meeting to order February 7th, 2023. We have an approval of tonight's agenda, please.
Make a motion to approve.
For a second. Motion's made by Mr. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Brace to approve tonight's agenda. All in favor, Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Brace? Aye. Mr. Franzuto?
Dave, you're muted.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Come on.
Yeah, but just an hour before.
It's the wish of the board. Reviewed the minutes. Any revisions to be made? Shall we continue to the next meeting? Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made by Mr. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Brace to continue approval for draft minutes at our next meeting. All in favor, Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Brace?
Aye.
Mr. Franzuto?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Nothing under chairman's report at this moment, except for window papers for election.
When do they do? You could pick them up yesterday or yesterday going forward.
Okay,
And then they're due on the 22nd
all right,
of March.
great, thank you. I did attend the NSA meeting, Shellfish Association.
From Dave Boston.
That was January 24th. There was concern that the fertilizer ban is not being resubmitted as written. And Emily Molden mentioned that they will be granting, the Nantucket Land Council will be granting $10,000 to fishing and trapping green crabs. And Toscana has agreed to take them to add to their compost.
Very good.
Your job's done now.
No, I don't think so. I think
There-
you get 10,000 each year.
Is
Sorry.
there a Marine Department report?
She was not present.
Move on. Natural
Yes,
resources.
Mr. Chairman, Dave Bossi's on the meeting
Hi, Dave. Thank you.
via phone. Yep.
Okay,
Natural resources, Tara.
sure. Okay, so since we've last spoke, we have received the photo bioreactor and completed our 3-day training on it. And I don't know if you guys have been keeping up on social media, but we had a naming contest and the name that won was Weird Al Plankovic. So, and ironically, it got tweeted, like Weird Al Yankovic tweeted back saying that it was such an honor to have a bioreactor named after him. And we made Channel 7 News today in Boston for
Okay.
this Weird Al bioreactor. So it's gaining some more traction than we anticipated with some silliness. But anyways, so that's that. We are growing algae in it right now. It's reached full capacity and now we're messing around with like the parameters, trying to see how we can maximize the densities. So far it's been kind of like a set it and forget it type machine, and it's all automated and it generates the information that you can check from your phone, which is pretty cool. But I mean, the point is to make sure that it's, you know, creating a ton of algae for us. So that's what we need to like fine tune right now. So we're going to be working on that over the next couple of weeks. What else? We had to do Quentin the Quahog last week for Groundhog's Day. That's where you open the quahog, you see which way it squirts. Sheila was out of town, so we did that.
Was that Joe Manella that did it?
Joe Manella did it. He's kind of our social media presence. He enjoys that sort of thing.
Good.
in March, I'm gonna be attending the National Shellfish Association meeting in Baltimore. And that's a 5-day conference where all people that are associated with shellfish and research and the trade industry get together and present papers, and it's just a quick way to get an update on everything going on shellfish wise. And I will be presenting what we're doing here on Nantucket as far as the hatchery and our restoration projects go too. So that'll be fun and exciting. Other than that, this Friday, we posted 3 intern positions. These are seasonal positions that run for about 12 weeks, sometimes 15 weeks, usually starting in June and ending in September. So we'll be closing those in a couple weeks, hopefully hiring. We do give preference to interns that are returning. And I'm hoping this week we will have our 2 full-time positions posted, the assistant biologist and the water quality specialist. We've just been waiting on the union to come back with a few changes that we wanted to make to see if that's going to work out. We had our first harbor plan meeting this afternoon, where it was just the introduction to the board and the timeline and what we're going to be tackling. And then I think the other stuff I have is on the agenda already, so I'll save it. But things are a little interesting right now at the hatchery and in our department because we are going through such a big transition. And there are only 2 of us down at the hatchery, so it's been a lot. So we're just trying to figure out how we're going to get through the season and train new people. But it should be fine. So that is my report for today. I don't have an update on the base scout bushel count because Jeff hadn't put in the papers from JC yet. So I'm hoping that if I can get those in this week from Jeff, I can send around an email and let you guys know what the count is up to.
How many boats have you noticed? You
I
know,
haven't noticed. I've been out of town, but it's
I saw 3 out in Mattocket this morning.
Oh.
So that, for a cold morning. it's pretty
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Maybe where you are.
Questions, comments from the board on natural resources or marine department? Not seeing or hearing any questions from the public on natural resources. Old business, Vineyard Wind and Mayflower Wind. I guess there's a presentation tomorrow from Mayflower Wind. It's an 11 o'clock at Plus Building, I'm told, where a representative from selected boards and commissions will be presented to by Mayflower Wind between 2 and 4 tomorrow. Open to the public here in this building, presentation from Mayflower Wind, and then I believe it's on the select board's agenda for tomorrow, 5:30 p.m.'s meeting. I was just questioning in my mind maybe why we're not invited to a seat at the table at the 11 o'clock meeting tomorrow.
Is it a public meeting?
I believe that's just the Chamber of Commerce, isn't it? 11 o'clock. I thought that was the chamber, but maybe not.
At the chamber?
I thought this was at the chamber. Isn't tomorrow's at the chamber of 11? I thought it was. Maybe I'm mistaken.
And I may be mistaken as well. But a member of the Historical Association mentioned it was 11 at the Plus Department. And he was selected as a representative.
Possibly I'm wrong then. Okay.
Tara, anything on traveling the movement of silk plumes from the pile driving?
Oh, no, I don't have anything.
Okay. Any discussion? Questions, comments from the board on Vineyard Wind or Mayflower Wind?
I know we were given a copy of the amicus brief. It was filed. The lady who did the presentation, I think,
Amy
emailed it to
Sibian.
all of us. So, yes.
Mhm.
That's just a long waiting period now.
Mhm,
I just think we should get all the information in front of us, all of it,
mhm.
and then just make a recommendation to the select board.
Mhm.
I feel strongly that this thing's been approved. They're moving forward. They're laying cable on the mainland. They're creating a port in New Bedford to service it. I just feel strongly that yes, I know we have a voice in this town, but we're an advisory board. We can only say to the select board, we don't want this to happen.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean it's not gonna, that doesn't mean they're gonna listen to us, but I just, plus I'm a supporter of wind. And I support this project, and I'm like, I'm conflicted. I want to help our fishermen, our scalpers, our harbor, keep it silted. It's not too much sand piling up in it, but I want to see hard data that says that putting in those pylons is going to cause plumes that's going to fill up the harbor.
Mhm.
I want to see someone, I think they're calling Sarah Okai
Mhm.
and seeing what she said. I want to hear some data. I mean,
I agree.
the person, Amy DeCivio, who spoke at the last meeting, she said, you know, it's happening in the North Sea. Great, okay, but this isn't the North Sea.
Mhm.
And then in listening to Dave Franzuto at the meeting, on the minutes this afternoon, he's right. You know, I'm not in the Coast Guard, but he's right. You know, the water between here and the Vineyard and the Muskegon Channel is vicious.
Mhm.
So does that mean that it going slow enough to wrap around the island, or is it sending that stuff out over toward the Vineyard? I don't know, but we don't know. We're just taking this from some opponents to the wind farm. We need to be properly educated before we can make a recommendation.
Absolutely, and not having all the information, the only other thing that I feel would be a concern to this board would be if there's, what is the data on the transmission lines and any negative effect on wildlife that lives on the bottom.
I mean, I would think that we would look to National Grid and all the follow-up that might have been done on that, because there's two cables between here and the mainland, and they use the same technique of laying the cable in the ground.
Mhm.
And so they might look to that.
That could be a good comparison.
And Dave, you know, Dave said that, you know, there's a lot of cobble and gravel, just a mess down there. So is there other creatures down there that we need to protect that are underneath that mess, or are they on top, or, but I just,
All right, well, Mr. Brace, to clarify between the two, Vineyard Wind has been approved, yes. Mayflower Wind has not.
right, I was just talking about Vineyard Wind.
So just to simply clarify that,
Yep.
this is they are, Mayflower Wind is now presenting to the island. I don't know whether they're offering mitigation funds as Vineyard Wind did. It would simply be interesting to know. And I don't want to consume a lot of time on this, as the rest of you I know do not as well, but I'd also like to stay on top of what's going on as best as we can, at least to the effect that where something may or may not have an effect here on us.
I mean, when you look at the grid of the proposed development, it goes again from here all the way down to the Carolinas.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of people gonna fight, right or wrong. On both sides of this, so it's not going away. the windmills are not gonna go away, or the
Right.
proponent, or the avenue of wind farms. It's a matter of what's gonna be, again, factually correct related to marine life and other issues, so.
Board members,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Franzuto.
Well, you know my feelings on this. I think in the case of Vineyard Wind, I think the it's a done deal and the barns, the doors, the horses out of the barn or whatever that saying is. But anyway, but Peter brings up a good point, and I have a lot of faith in Sarah Octane. As a matter of fact, her name was mentioned today at the Harbor Plan meeting, and it's kind of one of those blasts from the past, and you kind of shake your head and you say, you know what? That's a pretty smart person, number one. And number two, I think in my eyes, she's got credibility. And she's now the director for the Provincetown Coastal Coastal Studies. And I ran into her the other day, and I'm actually going to call her and ask her what she thinks about this, because she's somebody that I would trust, and she's an oceanographer. She's a bright woman. She cares about Nantucket, and if she said, I guess my point is, if she were to say to me, "Hey, listen up, dummy, this is something you need to be paying attention to," I would give it more credence. I would give it another look. But so that's what I'm going to do. I think that, like I said, I think Vineyard Wind is a done deal. But this Mayflower thing, and now apparently they're going to change their name to some other thing. But I saw Mayflower Wind on the chart from that email from that lady. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do, and I'll report back to the board on that.
Great, thank you, Dave. Anybody else? Vineyard Wind, Mayflower Wind, green crabs.
Well, I'm pretty close to being done with the write-up. I'm trying to cull it down.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I think that I told Ken that maybe he could introduce himself and talk in public comment. If that's all right.
That's fine.
Do you want to come up here, Ken?
With natural resources, or at the end of the meeting?
With this one.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
Do you want to come up here?
Whatever you want.
As you can see everybody. Sorry, Andy.
No, that's quite all right. Thank you, Peter.
What would you like for me to comment about, talk about?
Well,
All right, so we have Mr. Ken Brassfield. And you are like a scallop wholesaler.
Correct.
Thank you.
33 seasons.
And Mr. Brace, you invited.
well, I saw him at the post office last weekend. Hadn't seen him in a while, and we started to chat about the situation with scallops. The low price and the lack of places for scallopers to sell. And I just thought that there might be people in the audience, people on the board who don't have the full scoop and how it all works. And I thought Ken might want to enlighten us and tell him what he thinks about the season and going forward. And and he had been to a meeting in a long time, and he asked about Shad, and he wanted to know who was on and what we were working on.
Yeah.
So two missions. So
That's wonderful. I'd also like to know why the fluctuation in the market and why the marketability hasn't taken off the way we'd hoped, especially with the branding from the Shellfish Association. As we all know, restaurants run specials and menus change all the time, and it seems like all of a sudden the demand has dropped out, and in seeing Nantucket Bay scallops and Whole Foods and Hyannis for $50 a pound, and basically kind of sitting there getting milky and looking aged. I'm wondering if markets like that aren't spoiling it by putting such a high price on them. I mean, we also hear of $95 a pound in New York City, and so if you could share with us what you may believe or is having a negative effect on the market.
Well, I'll be happy to say what I know and don't know. I frankly, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm this season, I'm feeling like the blind man feeling an elephant for the first time. There are a few things that I'm sure of, and one is that scallops are a pretty high-end item. Nantucket caviar has never been cheap. So we're talking about, I think of it as the peak of the mountain, of the restaurant mountain. Only the people at the top can really, that's our market. And that market has been hit very hard by COVID. It's been hit in not as broad a problem as COVID, but it's been hit by the Me Too movement at some notable restaurants. It's been hit by things like higher prices for most food ingredients, from eggs to wheat to make bread and so forth. And it's always affected by changes in the restaurant landscape. Restaurant trends come and go. If you look at the top Michelin rated restaurants in New York the last year, I don't know about you, I can't pronounce half the names. They've gone to spicier foods and cheaper foods in some cases. It's not suitable for our delicate bay scallops. So we operate at the high end of the restaurant. That's our market niche. And if my customers who bought at a certain volume from me for 25 years and more, if just the ones that had gone out of business since COVID were still buying at the rate they did for 25 years, I would need 3 times the number of scallops I'm shipping now. It's just astonishing how many, and these are Michelin starred restaurants, in some cases 3 stars. Then there's a third group of people who are surviving, but have cut back on expensive items such as scallops. So this is another fact of life that's impacting demand. And in my 33 seasons, it's always been a supply limitation, not a demand limitation. But this year, while we're going through all the turmoil here on Nantucket with the other wholesalers, there's just as much turmoil going on in the restaurants. And as people seem to be trying to spend less money in some cases on restaurants, the high end takeout doesn't work for them. That's not what they do. So it's a very complicated situation that I have not figured out yet. And I think I'm probably going to have to go to New York and go around and see some of my long-term customers and say, what the heck's going on? Because I can tell you at restaurant after restaurant that would buy, say, 2 25-pound packages a week for years and years and years, I'm lucky if they're buying 1 10-pound package a week. And I talked to a chef this morning who jumped into a part of a restaurant group where we've been, doing business for a long time. And a chef who was a particular fan of our scallops moved to one of their other restaurants, and he thought they would need 2 packages a week. And they've still got scallops left over from last Friday's package. So I don't know what's going on. I'll be the first to admit it. So I'm trying to figure it out. So that I do know, that I don't know everything we need to know to understand what's going on. As a general comment, I'm reminded, I went to the harbor plan meetings when I could as a member of the public for 10 years. And I remember Diane Coombs, I thought, had a really wise comment. She said, if we take care of the scallops will take care of us. And I think the same thing applies to all of us in the industry. I think if wholesalers would take care of the fishermen, and the fishermen would take care of the wholesalers and work at this together, I think we'll get through this. I don't know how it's going to come out at the end. I don't know if some of these trends that are working against demand for Nantucket bays are going to, I don't know how long they're going to continue. People are going to keep going out to restaurants and they're going to buy from good fish markets and grocery stores, but I really don't know how this is going to play out or when. One final comment I would like to say is we really need to work on the harbor and the water quality, and we need to support every effort that's going on that. And why we don't enforce the fertilizer regulations is beyond me. We have to do things like that if we're going to take care of the scallops. And I think if we take care of the scallops, we'll figure out a way to sell them. We'll figure out a way to catch them. But we've got to work on our water quality. We're just not doing enough there, in my view. So, I'll be happy to try to answer questions if anybody has any, but that's kind of my take on things.
I have a question. I know you do a lot of bay scallop wholesaling. Do you do other high-end seafood? And if you do, are you seeing the same kind of trend with your other high-end products?
That's all we do. We are considering adding oysters to our product line of one.
Mhm.
We're early days in investigating that, and it's a different season, so we got time, but we're considering it.
Okay.
There's another thing that, we're those of us who know and love our Nantucket caviar. We have, I believe, a general idea that it's such a wonderful gift from the sea. At the same time, as restaurants are making choices, we are not without competition, and the competition is not only from what we would call lesser scallops, other bay scallops that don't have our flavor, or sea scallops, but other fish and non-fish items. I've had restaurant people tell me that at some price, it's not going to be the Nantucket Bay scallops. It's going to be the fish of the day. It's going to be Dover sole or some other, fine fish. So that's we do have competition, and we have to realize it, and we all have to work together to put our best foot forward, because without the scallops, there's no business, and without somebody walking into an expensive restaurant shelling out a couple $100 a person for dinner in New York, we're not going to have a demand. So we need to work together and figure out how to go forward with this.
Do you have other people in your, I'll say, group that might distribute to, I'll say, the Boston area or Portland, Maine area, something? I'm wondering if it's a New York issue or if
It's a nationwide issue.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a nationwide issue. My view, we do ship nationwide and have since the beginning. And some areas are more cost sensitive than others. Greater Southern California, for example, is more price sensitive than Northern California. But Northern California is also a factor. Another thing that's going on that I'm puzzled about is that up until recent years, our customers would start in with the opening day catch and go right up till the last fisherman threw in the towel. Now, a great number of them are quitting after the holidays. And that's, if we've got fishermen going out all till let's say some years, rare, I know very many of them went out till the end of March. The wholesaler has an obligation to take that catch. You don't just say, I need them today, I don't need them today. So this is very difficult when the customers just say, no, holidays are over, change the menu, we're gonna do something else. So that's another problem. That's a new problem.
I've been thinking about the demand for the bay scallops when all this is happening, and I've been in a lot of meetings with, I'm on the Bay Scallop Technical Committee for the Peconic Bay.
Hmm.
And, you know, since 2019, their fishery has been a complete bust
Right.
from, you know, things that they cannot control, like an increase in temperature.
Right.
And they've gone into each season with a decent population of scallops and forecasted what they're gonna be able to harvest, and then everything dies in August after
yeah.
they're done spawning, and it's something that worries me because obviously, you know, seawater temperatures are increasing, and that's not something you can really
Yeah.
control.
Yeah,
So I would think that if people, I mean, this is just my naive mind just saying, you know, if people understood what is going on, you know, the East Coast with the bay scallop fisheries, and the fact that you might not have a supply some day soon.
absolutely.
And there's nothing we would be able to do about it. It might, I don't know, I just feel like people would,
Yeah,
that demand would be
Yeah,
there.
for sure, global climate change is an issue, no question. It's hard to quantify. I don't know whether if we improve the water quality of the habitat, you know, how much weight would you give that? If we're gonna invest our resources in things, that's something we can do, it costs money. We can't do much about climate change, so, but how much impact is that? Is it 4-to-1? Is it 1-to-4? Is it whatever?
Well, what's the circulation like down in Peconic Bay? They're kind of like Matticat Harbor, they're open to the ocean.
Yeah, I
but
mean, it's a completely different situation, of course, you know, and I always say, you know, we're lucky, we're 35 miles out to sea,
Right.
you know, we don't have the same risk as everybody else, but I mean, I feel like it can still happen, you know, it just might take a little bit of time to trickle its way up north.
So eventually there's gonna be breaks in code too.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of issues going on with the fishery, Ken. I don't think it's just like the wholesale demand. I don't think it's just the water quality, you know, I think there's just, you know, one thing I worry about is what if we get all of this together? What if the water quality is good and the hatchery's working, the supply is good, and you can sell them, but we don't have any fishermen, you know, to fish them? I think there's scallops this year to catch all year round and could support a lot more fishermen, but there aren't people wanting to go out there at all.
I have practically begged in my weekly communications with my customers to consider the fact that keeping our fishermen fishing instead of going into construction trade is every bit as important as this issue of sustainability as all these other things that people like to talk about. That's a real buzzword, sustainability. So, well, this is as sustainability as it gets. And I haven't gotten a lot of, you know, they got other problems. They're trying to survive.
Yeah,
So, you know, so we have our problems. We got to somehow figure out how to survive. The restaurants got their problems. They're trying to survive, and our, you know, I'm just not seeing people step up and say, I'm going to start ordering now because I want to sustain the fishing.
So have you seen a decline in ordering prior years?
Say it's coming
It's,
in.
you know, like last year, the prior years, have you seen a decline previous to this year?
Well, last year, that's a touches on an important point. Last year, the harvest was so bad that also created a problem. And I don't know whether this is a long-term problem or a short-term problem. It goes like this. I would have a customer buying, let's say, a package every week. Okay, last year came along, the supply was so erratic that one particular very important customer said, you know, we love the scallops, but we'd like to print the menus a week in advance or whatever, and we can't depend on, you're not a reliable supplier. That's what they're saying. And politely, but that's the issue. We are, if we have, if the fishermen and the wholesalers don't get along, that hurts all of us because we collectively are not reliable suppliers. And so they took them off the menu because they just couldn't deal with this week we have them, or this day they want them 25 pounds on Wednesday or Thursday. but they can't go with 10 pounds and then maybe you don't get any that week. Well, you know, I spent 50, almost 50 years ago, I spent 3 years in a big corporate purchasing department. One of the things you rate about vendors is how reliable are they? And in that case, nobody's fault, we're not reliable. So get a fish on the menu for catch of the day or catch of the week or whatever that we can count on being here. And in the right amount and on the day we want it. And
That sounds a little bit like we need to educate the public again, if we can get scallop count back up. To that you have a decent supply that's gonna be available,
yeah,
and that may help rectify the problem.
all
in the long-
these things are interrelated.
I think there needs to be an entire revitalization of the fishery, recreational, commercial, including like getting more access for the working waterfront for the fishermen. They're just losing that access, and it's becoming harder and harder for people to get out there and do something about it.
Yeah, when when the harvest was in the neighborhood, 10,000 bushel harvest was kind of in the back of my mind is, okay, we're doing okay. You know, there's enough for fishermen and openers and wholesalers and blah, blah, blah. That was a pretty decent supply. But we haven't had a 10,000 bushel harvest in a few years. And so we're paying the price for that.
I'm wondering, Tara, do you think our fishing fleet is aging out?
I mean, I don't like to say that they're aging out because there are some new entries in there, and I think they can get offended by that because they're fishing, but I don't think that, I mean, there are a lot of fishermen that are gonna age out, I would say, within the next 5 years. And I don't see a lot of people busting to get into it. And so, like, from my standpoint, I think we will always have a recreational based off fishery, but I'm thinking about what if there isn't a commercial fishery, and it's not because there aren't scallops to catch, it's because nobody wants to do it, or there isn't money in it. What does that look like? Like, is that what Nantucket wants? I don't
Well,
know.
I'll tell you also, there's some unsung heroes here. They're kind of like the linemen in football, and that's the openers. And it's very hard, I'm told, to get good openers. I mean, okay, I can come at 7 o'clock at night, but and Ed Stojak used to tell me about, and his, he goes back longer than I do, that typically the high school kids were the openers. They'd come on and make spinning milk. They don't do that anymore.
When I saw the price go up last year to $22 a pound, I thought, finally, the fishermen are getting what they deserve. And to see it drop to 13 this year is just disheartening and a slap in the face to the fishermen, and also a discouragement to anybody new wanting to come in. The younger generation that I see entering, there was an older generation in their family that scalloped as well. And that's basically all that's left are the families that have been involved. Very few individuals stepping in that were not introduced to it through family or through a mentor of sorts that took them out fishing and they happen to like it. We had some discussion a while back, I think it was here and maybe NSA as well, as somehow trying to get high school kids that might be interested out on a boat during the season. And
Like an apprentice program.
yeah, but of course, a seasoned fisherman also doesn't want to have a guest on
Working
board
hard,
that may be asking, I can remember asking my dad when I was 12, when's the last tow?
yeah.
And he didn't want to hear that question.
Yeah. What, does anybody know why the price went to 30? I mean, I don't know the thought processes of that. Does anybody?
Well, I mean, I'm sure it has a lot to do with what you talked about in the beginning. When you started talking, and if it's Foley Fish and Fulton coming here on the first day, even coming here during the recreational days to get a sense of it, and then they're thinking about that, and then they come on the first day, and they get information for everybody, and then they set the price. It's, I always thought that it was a lot of those guys that we all look to, or that the industry looked to set the price, and if it changed, it had a lot to do with what their demand was, because stuff was getting shipped off island. And I'm just zooming around here, but then you have sales not being open, and Clinton's closed for a certain amount of time, so there's nobody buying, and then there's rivalries between people who used to buy at one place and
Right,
used to sell at one place but not selling there anymore, and then they come back and there's no way that they can sell there because
yeah,
they're pissed off. So the demand, we're creating a demand problem here right on the island. So
squabbling.
and there's the demand is low off island, as you're saying, but then here we're adding fuel to the fire by not buying scallops. And so maybe that's it. I
Well-
mean, I was marveled at how you could go into sales in August and get an appetizer of bay scallops, and that's because they buy it all up and freeze it.
Right.
And so why wouldn't the fish stores want to be doing that now? Because they have customers, right, that would want to buy them in the summertime.
Right.
So I think all of that is maybe a reason.
Yeah, when Pete Dooley and I started our company, as I recall, the way he told me that it worked was that the Glidens and, I mean, not the Glidens, sorry about that. The Conleys and the Foleys would tell the Nantucket wholesalers
Yeah.
what to pay, and they were really not true wholesalers, they were brokers, so they would give them 50 cents a pound and tell them what to pay the fishermen, and then they'd go off twice a week in trucks. Then it went to $1 a pound, and I don't know how that works now.
Now, so you're shipping out packages. 10 pounds, 25 pounds, 2 25-pound packages, and how does the price jump from $20 to the fisherman to $95 in a fish market in New York? Is the shipping, I mean, I don't, you don't need to get real technical about it,
No,
but
it's a good question. I wondered the same thing. How's that happening? How many middlemen there are in there? I don't know what kind of markup, but right, how do you get from 13 to 95? I mean,
It might not even be
there's got-
anything that complicated. It might be the fish store going, I know I have customers that want this stuff, and it's inflation,
it may be, yeah.
and I can make this money. I
Yeah.
can bump it up this much
That's another
because,
possibility, no question. I mean, the guy might be buying for $13 and selling for 90. And he's making a huge margin. Now, how much is his volume? I don't know. I would like to know if these, I mean, I've had friends send me pictures from Washington, $87 a pound. And so I'd like to know if they, because I've had high-end grocery stores get excited about this, and they buy a 120-pound order and at our regular price, and there was never a second order. Why? Because they couldn't sell it at the price then they had to mark it up by, and I don't think they were as greedy as these. I don't really know, but I know there was no second order. They tried it, it didn't work.
well, and that's what, back to Whole Foods and Hyannis at $50 a pound.
Yeah,
There are a lot of people who used to live here that live on the Cape now,
right.
and they're all interested in enjoying a scallop meal, a Nantucket Bay scallop meal, and but when they see them in Whole Foods, they're reaching out to people who live here. Hey, you're coming away, can you bring me some scallops?
Yeah.
Because $50 is just out of the range, and I feel as though, how long can they sit there, first of all, in a cold case, an open cold case, and how many are ending up out in the dumpster because they didn't sell at that price? And Price is really not supposed to be in our realm. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but it's part of
It's
what
important.
makes the fishery survive,
Yeah,
and to see that drop to $13 a pound, I felt like here we are going back to the 1970s or something, even though I'm sure it was
Yeah.
like
And
$4 or
I
$5 or
think
$6 a pound then, but
Yeah, and another thing I'm curious about is, where are the scallops coming from that are in the markets? There are a lot, I think there are a lot more scallops that are touted to be Nantucket-based scallops that aren't. This was probably 10 or 15 years ago. My office that I use in our house on the third floor, and I look out toward the ocean, and then, so I looked out and there were a bunch of rabbit hunters out there, and I went down to see what was going on, because we had rabbits in the yard, and I was gonna give them permission to make a pass through the yard with their dogs. So I go down and talk to the kind of leader of the group, and, oh, Charlie down there is in the scallop business. I said, come meet, say hello to this gentleman, Charlie. I said, what do you do, Charlie? And he said, well, I'm out of New Bedford. I drive out to the Baja every year in a truck, and I get filled up with scallops, and I bring it back to New Bedford. Okay, so you can just picture the next morning, somebody's gonna walk into Fulton Fish Market in New York and say, are these scallops fresh? Yes, they just came in from New Bedford this morning. Well, they came out of the water, the Baja California, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And the same thing happened. I got a call from somebody, this is 20 years ago. Would you be interested in buying some scallops? Well, tell me about them. He said, well, I got 10,000 pounds. I can sell them to you for $2 a pound. I said, really? Where'd you get them? He said, I came from, I said, where are they? He said, they're in the hold of a ship in Boston Harbor. I said, where did they come from? He said, they came from China. And I said, no, that's not what we can do. So, there are a lot of, like Dave Ronsudo still tuned in. He and I talked about something a few years ago. I was in New York in May, and in Chitterella, which is one of the top fish markets in New York, including fish, they had Nantucket-based scallops, fresh. And I told Dave about it, and he tracked down that was coming from a wholesaler on the Cape. So there's a lot of scallops out there that are not the real deal. And that, I guess, goes back to putting tags in the boxes for the NSA, Nantucket, true Nantucket-based scallops. But it's a war that's got to be constantly fought, and you got to educate the customers about what's going on.
I'm wondering if what you were talking about, it being COVID and Me Too movement, and it's a different cooks now doing different foods that don't necessarily need the scallop, and demand at the restaurants not being as great. I'm wondering if that made the fish stores on Nantucket, who might be shipping to those guys, realize that there's not the market that there was before, so that they felt like it was okay to shut down for a while.
You just touched on an important point, Peter. It reminds me, Nantucket bays are hard to cook properly. And I remember back, this is the first year I've looked for customers in 25 years. Once I got started in, and it's not my background, I'm a chemical engineer, I worked for big chemical and energy companies. But I knew marketing processes, so I kind of got started in the first 2 or 3 years. I was all I wanted to handle. It's something I did in retirement. But we were looking for customers, and there was a chef, there was a restaurant in New Orleans that was written up in Gourmet magazine, and I called the chef and had a nice conversation with him. He said, I love Nantucket-based scallops, but I'm the only one in the restaurant that could cook them properly, and I've got to supervise 50 cooks, and I can't use them. And they've got to be cooked just right. If you have an amateur, if you don't have a really good, if you're going to be in the kind of restaurant that can afford the scallops in the first place, they're going to have a lot of cooks and sous chefs and stuff. And if they're going to be hard to cook, that's in an era when it's hard to get enough people to even run the restaurants, I can see how that could knock us out of a few places.
a lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts, absolutely.
Interesting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Franzuto.
So you didn't think you were gonna get away with me not saying anything, right?
No, we were wondering why you're so quiet.
Well, I was listening to Ken. I've known Ken for 1,000 years. He's a very, very, very brilliant man. And he does know the insight of the fishery and the market. So I'm glad to see him, and I'm glad he shared some of that with us.
Thank you, Dave. You're too kind.
Thanks, Dave. And if the fishermen, if this tanking of the price continues, the fishermen there's, for years, there have been people suggesting creating their own co-op. How would that affect you if it actually happened?
Well,
Or
somebody.
can you somehow join together and get involved? in
Well,
something like that?
I'd have to think about that. I kind of, somebody that you probably all know, he's been a concerned citizen, asked me something about that a few years ago, and I said, I'll change my brand when Coke and Pepsi change their brands. So I've built up a brand that has value, and I would love to help the industry. Figuring out how to do it in a useful way. And I want my little company to be sustainable too, like everybody else. So I'd have to think about that. I'd be willing to explore things. But I think, again, my main message here tonight is that we're all in this together.
Anything else? I'm glad Peter ran into you. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you for your insight.
Yeah,
I don't know
definitely.
if
Thank you
it's
for
worth
coming.
anything, but there's more I don't know than what I do know. So that's for sure.
Well, the Nantucket Bay scallop, and I imagine, and I've heard that vineyard scallops are sometimes sold with Nantucket. I mean, who's heard of Martha's Vineyards Bay scallop versus Nantucket Bay scallop? And I imagine they are like twins to our scallop.
Ours are better.
Yeah.
No, but really, are you saying that because you're from Nantucket and it's prideful, or are you saying that in reality?
Well, I've been told that by chefs and others. So as to would they all agree with it? Probably not, but some do.
Well, as far as the appearance goes, after the scallop shucked, you're aware of, the little oblong part where the gut was connected to the muscle. A stamped out scallop is not going to have that. I'd be interested to see the Chinese scallops you mentioned. Do they have that? And so, a sea scallop doesn't have that.
No.
And so really it's very unique to, I would have to say Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and the Cape, if the Cape had any left. But I would imagine when the Cape had scallops, they look just like ours after they're shucked. The taste is another thing, I'll agree. But the look, the appearance of an authentic bay scallop it doesn't compare to any other scallop, and I'm curious to know. You mentioned earlier education. You have to educate cooks, chefs about this, so that they know what they're getting, and the public as well. And this to me is like the Nantucket Bay scallop has its own signature right on it. By having that, I call it a tag, like a skin tag almost.
Yeah.
It's just,
Just
a little protruding.
Term of an idea, but I think that the restaurants that can afford Nantucket Bay scallops, they know that. You've got a few consumers who maybe read in the paper or had one bad experience about skate stepped out, and so like the old saying that bad news travels, 10 times as fast, 20 times as fast as good news. But I think it's probably useful to our industry here to keep putting the name, these are true Nantucket Bay scallops. I think that's a really good thing. I think going too far beyond that is kind of a waste of resources. This way.
Thank you, Ken. One last go around, if any?
We can always get him back here. He's not going anywhere.
Good.
I'm Still around kicking.
Great.
He's playing golf in the better days.
Thank you,
Used
Ken.
to. All right. Nice being with
Take
you.
care.
Thanks for coming, Ken.
Back to green crabs.
So I'm fine in the process of finalizing a write-up. And I'll again send it out to everybody that can look at it. Tell me, change this, do whatever you want. I still think want to get it over to the Harbor Action Committee. One thing I was just recently read, one of the key things to do is a catch per unit effort, CPUE. And there's a study done out there that if you have a catch per unit higher than 15 crabs per every 24-hour period, that you're not going to have success with your, eelgrass restoration. So what they've done is they've started studying how many crabs in a 24-hour period for a couple of weeks in a row are in the approximate areas where we're going to do transplanting eelgrass to make sure it's viable. So it's not just going to be food for the green crabs. So that's why I want to make sure we get that over to the harbor plan. Is that like it's great that we have people going to step up and some money being thrown at it. But I think it's going to have to be an ongoing effort because part of the write-up is it's one of the top 5 invasive species in the world
Huh.
for marine life. Really.
We need to market them somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the whole thing that I'm concerned is like, it's so, if they multiply so quickly and can just go after everything. They just don't go after eelgrass. Like I said, they go after small, they'll go after shellfish, they'll go after small lobsters, they'll go after herring. And so they just keep eating.
Wow, like a yellow lab.
I'll get that out to everybody. And
Yeah, I
Thank
think,
you. All right. Tara?
I was just gonna say, I think, this NSA conference that I'm going to has a section on green crab, so take a listen and see what others are saying.
Mr. Franzuto?
Yeah, I think that Scott needs to get that information to the Fishermen's Association too, so they're not spinning their wheels with the money that they're wanting to spend.
The NSA and the NLC.
Right.
Okay.
If they've dedicated $10,000, then they need to be on the forefront of getting this information too, so they can focus their efforts.
That's actually the land council that's granting that.
Okay, all right.
The NSA, I'm sure, would get involved with granting as well. They're looking for positive ways to spend money. So they just raised the high school scholarship from 8,000 to 10,000, I believe.
I just have one other thing to say about what Ken Bracefield said, and that is, I know you guys hate to hear the history, but sometimes you have to understand it. When we had 400 licenses and 200 active fishermen and 100 boats on opening day, I mean, it's a whole different dynamic than what you have today with the population. So there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed, but it's just so different than it was 20 years ago.
Dave, we don't hate to hear the history. It's one of the reasons we like having you on the board, because your knowledge goes so far back. So don't feel shy to speak up.
Well, I know, but it's just this is something. I mean, if you could have seen me on the screen while Bracefield was talking, I was shaking my head the whole time. It's just I just can't. I certainly can't figure it out. But the dynamic of the whole thing, like Tara was saying, wouldn't it be something if someday we had more bay scallops than we were able or willing to harvest? It's just holy mackerel. Anyway.
Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
Anything else on green crabs?
No,
Board members? Harbors Action Plan Committee. Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board recommendations. Obviously, this is a fledgling committee.
Yep.
Just did their meet and greet. So we have time to consider our recommendations, what's important to us, what we feel we should pass on to the committee. So keep that in mind. Jot
They're
down
looking-
those.
The only thing that I can add to what Tara and Peter said was that the process will probably not take as long as the last time, that they're looking to be for state approval by early 24. So that's really all I wanted to share with the board and what I took away from it today. And, you know, it's a good group, a lot of the same players. So I think we'll get going here pretty quick.
Thanks, Dave. Anything to add, Peter?
I don't know, one of the things I said was, you know, it seemed like they wanted us to meet monthly, and I said, I think that we may have lighter meetings, but that maybe twice a month is better, because you never know what's gonna come up. And we all go to lots of meetings, and we're used to that, but, I looked at the group and they all look hungry to do something, so I think stuff gets lost if it's just once a month, so. Even if we only meet for 40 minutes, but at least, you know, we got that out, and it also keeps it fresh in your mind, so.
Yep.
They'll be electing officers at the next meeting.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Dave. Anything else on the Harbor Action Plan Committee? Sediment transport study.
So most likely the meetings will be here in this room, so that we can avail ourselves of the hybrid situation. They have a hybrid setup at the community room where we met at the police station, but it's not, I guess it's not as good as this, so.
Wow.
we're in the high tech spot.
On the inside. Okay, sediment transport study and dredge plan. Anything new on this?
I received 4 submissions from various companies. We are reviewing them this week. The department is, hopefully we will have that wrapped up by Friday morning. And then we'll submit that to the finance department, and I think it goes from there. Usually takes a while, but yeah, 4 big proposals. So,
4 proposals to create this plan for us.
you know,
That's wonderful. Great. Of
Tara,
course.
can you share the names of any of them?
let's see, I only know one off the top of my head, but it's Geosyntec.
All right, no, it's no big deal. I just wonder.
Anybody else? Pool water discharge? Anything new? Any discussion? Tara, do you know of anything coming of the Monomoy incident?
I don't, I asked Jeff about pool water discharge this afternoon, and he said that I think you were at the BOS meeting last week when they were talking about when they were gonna have their recommendations ready. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. We'll get into that with the next topic. If there's nothing else on pool water, we'll move to health of the harbors, stormwater runoff, harbor impacts, discussion of possible production of a zone map for contributors to the runoff. The the select board did meet last Wednesday, had on their agenda, calling it surface water. And it basically let them know that we here at SHAB have had this on our agenda for quite some time. And they're actually working on what it sounds like, or have received their second draft between Mr. Carlson and Mr. Santa Maria. They're drafting a proposal for stormwater runoff regulations. Peter, I know when we were doing the agenda Friday that I said I would try to get something drawn up that we could all look at and possibly revise and approve, but I have not done that, and I'm sorry to have to announce that, but we have time, I believe, but not too much to get our opinion across. And I'd like to hopefully by the next meeting have something for sure, and that we can vote on and pass on to the select board to be added to their next draft or considered.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I contacted the tax bill mailing people, and they're willing to include our handout that Dave Bossie's been working on in as many tax bills as many tax bill mailings as we want. It's non-political. I explained to them what it was. There, it'll probably be one page or one page two-sided. They're willing to do that. They don't believe that there'll be any additional cost to the mailing. So if we want to keep moving forward that, and like I said, I would still like to, and it's good that Carlson and the health guy are working on this, because maybe we could tie this whole thing together with a summer Saturday morning session of people coming in and looking at what their individual properties are contributing. So maybe we can tie this whole thing together and, in the community room with some computers. And I think it worked for the FEMA flood maps. I think it would work for this.
I like it. Good idea, Dave.
So, Mr. Chairman, do you think that we need, to tell town administration that we're gonna do this and put it in the tax bills? Or can we just do it?
I think somebody has to sign off on that.
Yeah, I would. Don't you,
Well,
Dave?
I'll tell you who signs off on it. It's the finance director, and it went by him and he said it's no problem. Now, whether that needs an additional approval, I can't tell you, but the tax collector supervisor went to the finance director and explained what we were doing. And he said it was no sweat. So again, I think if it's a collaborative issue with what health and natural resources doing, I think that's a good thing. If you want to send a letter and a possible copy of what Dave Bossie's been working on for approval with the selectmen, that would be another way to do that.
Well, I just think that as a courtesy to them, we'd say, this is where, this is what we're gonna do, and we have the approval of this person and that person, and it's not gonna cost anything, and we're just letting you know that we're gonna do this. And
Yep.
Hopefully we don't hear anything back. Hopefully they appreciate what we're doing. It's work that the select board doesn't have to do that we're doing, so.
Yep. I think the other thing too is that, Tara, if you have you had the opportunity to tell Jeff what we're talking about doing?
I haven't.
Okay, well, what I can do is I can take the email that Dave Bossie sent me and the email that I got from the finance people and forward that to you and Jeff, so you can see where we're at right now.
That would be great, Dave. And Mr. Brace, similar to this, we we wrote the letter about to the high speed, to Highline and
Yeah.
Steamship. You simply asked Erica, I believe, I'm sure, talked with Libby,
Yeah,
and they came back to you and said, go
Right.
ahead and send the letter directly.
yeah.
And this would be kind of similar to that.
Just
I think the select board should have it in their hands as well. And it would be nice to have their blessing on this as well. But moving forward, as Mr. Franzuto and Mr. Bossi already have, I think is a good idea.
So is the board instructing me to write a letter,
Uh,
or are we at that point yet?
Well, Mr. Bossi, what do you have? You sent it out to everybody, yes? You muted, Dave?
I am.
Okay,
Yeah, well, I was rather. Yes, I sent that out to everyone. It's basically the town has a GIS map that they have one for the harbor, one for Mattakit. And so I took the one for the harbor, added a link to the bottom to allow people to go view it as a PDF online, and you can zoom right into your street, which is what Dave was talking about in the summer presentation, where we could educate people as to how they could do that. Go to these maps that are available on the town website and zoom down in and look at their house and see how their house affects the island. I also added, there's some confusion about zone A and zone B, and Tara had explained to me what that meant. So I put a little wording in there so people didn't have a question about that. But yeah, I sent that around to everybody a couple weeks ago.
yes. Thank you, Dave. So, where does that leave us now? Dave?
I'd
Mr.
suggest, I'm sorry, I'd suggest that we kind of informally have Peter to maybe check with the board, with our contact to see if, look, we're going to go ahead and do this. We've got all these people in town buying into it and assisting it with us, and we'd like to enclose this in the tax literature. Just wanted to let you know we're doing it and let it go at that. I don't think we need approval for it.
So essentially, with the mailer, we're gonna tell people that if you live in these zones, there's a good chance that what's flowing off your property is flowing into the harbor. And that's just a way this is just a way to tease people into maybe coming to a workshop, which we haven't decided on yet. And we're also going to provide the link to the GIS system, the actual place where they can see where their property is. And we're going to word that somehow. Am I correct?
Mhm.
I think
we're
you're
gonna-
correct. I think it may need a little more wording around the image I sent that has all that information in it to describe that here's this, here's the image. Look at it. Here's where we can go for more detail, and maybe some wording to say we are going to present. The intention is to present this summer a bit of an education series on how to make use of the GIS maps of the town that the town has, in order to really see how your property impacts Nantucket, something like that. But we probably need a little more wording to go along with an insert.
Well, why don't I write something up for the next meeting then? So I don't freehand it. And then the two Daves can cut it up and tell me what needs to be changed and how it should be. Does that sound okay?
Great.
Yep, works for me. Yep.
Will you be working on that? Beginning of these next 2 weeks or closer to the end? Can you project?
Me?
Mr. Brace, yeah,
Gotta go off my butt and do it. So I'll probably start it this week.
okay. All right. I'm glad to sit down with you or, get on the phone and
Yeah.
work on this together as well.
Because I think a lot of people know about the GIS system, so we don't want to make people feel stupid.
Mhm.
And we have to have clear intention of what we're doing so that when we talk to the select board for the town administration, they know what we're doing as a courtesy, but also the public, you know. So,
So
Mr.
this
Chairman,
will,
one more thing.
Mr.
Um,
Bossy,
So a lot of people know about MapGeo and all the and may know many of the features of it, but these GIS maps are not in MapGeo, which makes it a bit awkward. It'd be really nice if we could start to explore how these other freestanding GIS maps could be incorporated as layers in MapGeo. It's a separate discussion, but something it'd be worth looking into. So these other maps are available on the town website. When you go into GIS maps, and you can see all the maps we have. But if you go to the more general MapGeo, where you can look up houses, you can look up a lot of different things. You can see where sewer flows. You can do all these interesting things on the in layers. You cannot look at these town maps that show the impact, the runoff into the harbors, the two harbors, Mattocket and Nantucket.
so I'm just, what I'm getting at is that we have to come off like, yes, we definitely know what we're talking about. This is what we want to do. So we're not spitballing, that's all. So I'll write something which is definitely not going to be exactly what we need, and then we would work it from there.
Yeah, that's fine. That's great. Yep.
You know, I'll be back next week. And I'll talk to, my to-do list is getting longer here. I'll talk to Nathan Porter as to why that isn't in as a layer. I'll find out. And maybe it's, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not a problem. Maybe there's some other mechanical reason. I don't know, but let me find out from Nathan Porter why, or if it could be, or whatever included.
That's great. Okay.
Andrew
Thank you.
Vorso owes me lunch anyway.
Oh, boy. Thank you, Dave and Dave. Anything else on stormwater runoff? Moving forward to new business, Coastal Resilience Advisory Board. Do we have an update?
Yes. So, the main thing we talked about at the January 24th meeting is, you know, what happens now that SPPF has cried uncle and says that they're not going forward, and the select board vote to pull the application, unanimous vote by the select board to pull the expansion application from the consideration by the Conservation Commission. And the thing that we talked about a lot was, now that there isn't a blanket protection for all the property owners and potential expansion on either end, sort of set it and forget it, so to speak. What everyone seems to be worried about is that now individual property owners are going to come to the Conservation Commission and propose their own plans to how to protect their properties. And the you know, the mess that is, the potential mess that will cause. And so then what is our cracks role here and preparing people? Of course, we advocate for the road to be moved back, but how is that going to happen now that SPPF is not getting what it wants? So that we talked a lot about that. And we also talked a little bit about, or mostly Vince just presented his fourth quarter report. And so we sort of talked about that. And then there was also a chart that Vince showed us. Basically, it was the beginning of our discussion of our 2023 priorities for Coastal Resilience Plan recommendation implementation. So basically, which of the 40 recommendations within the plan are, you know, being implemented, what are being worked on. So there was a lot of discussion about that, and there was frustration among some of the members of CRAC that things weren't moving fast enough, and Vince explained why. And Also, he was invited by the Provincetown environmental planner, Kim Familiar, to present remotely to Provincetown's Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Because they like our plan and they all learn from us because they're starting their plan. So.
Is it moving forward to any action being taken? Is there a priority?
Well, there are these, quick, do it now, projects, which I think I've talked about before, which are things that need to be done now, but will also have the benefit of showing to the public that the CRP is serious. We are doing this. The water is coming. The glaciers are melting. So some of those projects are, raising Mattocket Road at First Bridge and leading up to an actual bridge as opposed to a culvert. Same thing at Second Bridge. Working on a solution for Millie's Bridge, and then also dealing with Folgers Marsh and Pulvis Road, going between those, and raising up that road, and then also where you go around Pulvis Road and the weak spot where the road broke through when we had that storm. The plan is to restore that marsh to a saltwater marsh, put culverts in there, and there's going to be an artificial reef of sorts, I guess, in that little corner. And I believe, are there going to be oysters, Tara?
You're talking about Sacagawea?
Yeah.
No,
No,
we're
okay.
not allowed to do oysters, but we are putting reef balls in there in hopes that they'll recruit naturally.
Right, so there'll be something a little bit more formidable there. So those are things that are all visible to the public, to everybody, and I know that those are high priorities. Some members like myself questioned the Steamship Authority's commitment. Their director, Bob Davis, came and spoke to us about, 4 or 5 meetings ago, and he said that the changes that need to be made at the Steamship Authority at Steamboat Wharf to make it resilient for sea level rise, they won't even be doing any designing and working on that until for 6 to 8 years, and then it's like 8 to 10 years is when they'll do whatever they're going to do, but they haven't told us that yet because they're still working on the Woods Hole terminal. So there was some frustration among our board members looking at that and going, geez, it's when you drive on the Easy Street, there's that dip, and it gets flooded every time there's a storm. So what are we going to do if we get cut off, even in the summertime? So,
Well, that's more of town. The grade raises up at Steamship Solid Fill.
right,
It's just getting to it.
Right.
That's an issue. But of course, if the level continues to rise, then Steamship will eventually have to take some action as well. I kind of looking at the past 3 years of what's been going on in the marina, with every bit of steel sheeting being redone, so to speak. Basically, they're putting in new steel sheeting in front of the old steel sheeting, and no grade being raised whatsoever there, and it's a bit lower than what the level grade is at Steamship. I'm surprised that it wasn't taken into consideration, since it's such an undertaking there. I imagine they'll be done with their steel sheeting this season. It appears they will be, have gone all the way around. So then where does coastal resiliency come into effect? Behind the marina, and the marina becomes submerged during these events, and we just kind of live with it that way. And
until they do something, or until we do something, or until we raise Broad Street and raise, I look at that situation and I think maybe there should be an overpass,
right,
it's
huge.
that goes right over the corner of Easy Street Boat Basin, and because the water's coming up.
And I'm just curious, back out to Mattocket, when you mentioned Millie's Bridge. And I always think how kind of fortunate Mattocket is to have two boat ramps. And has it ever been mentioned that Smith's Point, if the bridge wasn't maintained, that a ferry service would have to come into play? Like,
I know I know that there was some sort of study done or some sort of committee formed, I don't know how many years ago, that was one of the options. But then, and the feasibility of that, given how low the land is there, and is it worth it to go through all that to provide that service when it's obvious that that's a part of the island that's going to be underwater sooner than later.
Right.
So you can't give up on property owners just because you think of something that's going to happen, and we have to do everything we can to help people. But at some point it becomes pointless, and no one has said when that point is. So as far as I know, the plan is to maintain access over to Smith's Point.
Board members, questions, comments on Coastal Resilience Advisory Board update? Not seeing or hearing any, public questions or comment? I will take this moment to, Hillary Rayport reached out to me about Article 83. The same, kind of the same proposal as the year before. I think she's looking to have the at-large members elected versus appointed. She feels that that could be a positive. This is to the NP and EDC. That could be favorable to us here at SHAB, having elected members that the public can choose and elect people who may be more in tune to the environment and harbor quality versus appointed members, maybe not so much. I just am bringing this out there for the board to consider whether it's something viable for us to talk about, or simply study it at home, talk it up with people and how you may feel about that type of change to the board. And Peter, is there an article more related to us that we'll be discussing, or?
Well, there's the article by Curtis Barnes, Article 82 or Article 81, to work on the town charter and convert us over to a town council as opposed to form of government as opposed to select board, and town manager or town administrator. And then there was an article that is also sponsored by Jeff Carlson, Article 82, which converts some of the boards now elected into appointed boards. And so I reached out to Jeff and asked him about that, and I saw him today at the Harbor Plan Committee meeting and asked him about that, and he said that that article is going to be tabled. So it's not something we got to worry about immediately. But just for Dave Bossy and I think for Dave Franzuto and for Scott Anderson, we were challenged by the town administration, the select board, and town manager Libby Gibson to go and become an appointed board because there was an issue going through the state legislature about if you were a fisherman on the board, then it was conflict of interest a lot of the time because you were talking about issues that were economic in nature. So, and we as a board, we were tracking that, trying to get that passed, that it would grant a waiver for fishermen. And if it didn't pass, then being an appointed board would solve the conflict of issue. Interesting, but it never went anywhere. Both the state legislature and the state representatives and the Senate approved it, but then the governor at that time, Deval Patrick, vetoed it. but it never, town administration didn't push the issue, so. When I saw that article, I was like, oh, they're trying to do it again, so that's why I asked Jeff about it, so. Okay.
So was that the backbone to his reasoning? Were there any other issues? I mean, I realize that usually when we have during our election cycle, there hasn't been any competing seats. There's just enough people
I don't think that,
filing to run, and I was just wondering if that had anything to do with
I
it.
didn't ask him about that,
All right.
you know, I didn't, I mean, maybe that's a later question I can ask him, but it appears that it won't be a thing that'll be discussed at the meeting.
Well, I was just wondering if he was thinking there may be more interest in being appointed versus going through the trouble of getting your name on the ballot for election, and if that would help the board always have you know, a full board.
I guess I didn't have time to ask him
Yeah.
what the thinking was of doing this, but I will at a later date.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Questions or comments from the board or from the public? Anything you'd like to add for the next meeting? If you think anything, get in touch with Peter or I. Our next meeting's February 21st. Get in touch with us at least 4 days before that to add anything to the agenda. February 21st and March 7th are our next meetings. If there's nothing else to speak on tonight, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Motion's made by Mr. Brace, seconded by Mr. Anderson to adjourn tonight's meeting. All in favor, Mr. Brace,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
aye.
Mr. Bossy,
Aye.
Mr. Franzuto.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
No, no.
Good night.